Chinese multiplication, multiplying decimals. In previous videos we've looked at different ways to multiply using long multiplication in columns or the grid method. When we multiply decimals it can get very tricky because it's easy to make mistakes with the place value and the position of the digits and where the decimal point goes. So there's another method that you can use when you want to multiply decimals, and this is called the Chinese method. Let's take a more simple question such as 2.4 times 3.6. When we calculate using Chinese multiplication, we need to draw ourselves a grid. Now, each square in the grid is going to be split diagonally to separate the tens and the units. Each square in our grid will be split, and the top half of the grid is for the tens and the bottom half of the grid is for the units. The grid you draw should represent the number of digits you're multiplying by. So 2.4 times 3.6 is 2 digits by 2 digits. So we need a 2 by 2 grid. Now you have your grid, you need to draw diagonal lines from right to left. So starting in each box, a diagonal line, and you want the diagonal line to end up outside your boxes. So another diagonal line here, and another diagonal line here, and it's important that you do go from the right hand side of the box to the left hand side. Now you need to place the numbers that you're multiplying on the top and the right hand side of the grid. So I'm going to write 2.4, and you can see that my decimal point is in line with the lines of my grid, and then I'm going to write 3.6. Now it is really important that your decimal point lines up with this vertical line here, and the decimal point lines up with the horizontal line here. Now we need to work out where's our decimal point going to go in our answer. So what we're going to do is we're going to follow the decimal point along the line until it meets the other decimal point. So they're going to come here and then they meet there. Then your decimal point follows along the diagonal line, and that's where your decimal point goes when it exits the box. So I can put my decimal point here. So remember, your decimal point goes along the vertical and horizontal lines until they meet, which is here, and then you follow the diagonal line until you exit the box, and that's where your decimal point goes for your answer. Now we know where our decimal point goes, we can work out the answer. So we're going to multiply the digits against each other in the same way you would if you were doing the grid method. So let's have a look. We've got 4 times 3. Well, I know that 4 times 3 is 12, so I need to remember that the 110 goes on the top half of the box, and the 2 units goes in the bottom half of the box. So 4 times 3 is 12. Remember, we're separating tens and units by that diagonal line. So now I can do 2 times 3, and 2 times 3 is 6. So that means there are no tens and 6 units. Then I'm going to do 4 times 6, and 4 times 6 is 24. So that's 2 tens and 4 units. And then 2 times 6. And 2 times 6 is 12, which is 110 and 2 units. Now we're going to add up the totals along each diagonal. So you'll see that in my grid I have a set of diagonal numbers, and I'm going to add those together. So I've got here, in this little diagonal here, I've got just a 4 on its own, so the total is 4, and that writes outside the box. And then in this diagonal here, I've got 2, 2 and 2. So 2 plus 2 plus 2 is 6, and I write that outside the diagonal. Let's continue. We've got 1, 6 and 1. So 1, 6 plus 1 is 8, and that goes outside the diagonal. And then at the top I've just got a 0, so I don't need to write anything there because that's 0. And now I need to read round my answer from left to right, and I can see that my answer is 8.64. So I know that 2.4 times 3.6 is 8.64. Once you get the hang of it, it's a really easy method for multiplying decimals. It's just remembering those diagonal lines and how you write your answers as tens and units in your grid. Let's have a look at another question. So here we have 3.25 multiplied by 8.42. So we can see here that we have a 3-digit by 3-digit multiplication to do. So that means we need a 3 by 3 grid. So the first step is to draw in the diagonal lines, making sure they continue outside of the grid. Those in there. And then we need to write in the numbers. So here we have 3.25, making sure that decimal point goes on either a horizontal or a vertical line, and 8.42. Now remember that the first step is to make sure we know where the decimal point is going in our answer. So we're going to see where these decimal points meet. So we can see that the decimal points meet here if we follow along the horizontal and vertical lines. And then we continue down the diagonal line. And then I know that my decimal point is going to go on this diagonal line. So I can draw that in. My decimal point is going to go there. Now let's multiply each digit. So 5 times 8. 5 times 8 is 40, so I'm going to write 4 tens and 0 units. 2 times 8 is 16, 1 10 and 6 units. And 3 times 8 is 24, 2 tens and 4 units. Then move on to the next row. I've got 5 times 4 is 20, 2 times 4 is 8, that's 0 tens and 8 units, and 4 times 3 is 12, 1 10, 2 units. And then moving on to the last row, 5 times 2 is 10, 2 times 2 is 4, and 2 times 3 is 6. So now I've completed my grid. To work out my answer, remember I need to be looking along these diagonal lines and adding up the digits. So let's have a look. So my first diagonal line was just 0. I can put the 0 in, or I can just leave it. My second diagonal line, I've got 0, 1 and 4, so that equals 5. My next diagonal line, I've got 0, 2, 8 and 6. Now 2, 8 and 6 equals 16. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to write the 6 out of the 16, and then I'm going to carry the 10. And I carry the 10 to the diagonal line above it. So just to recap, if I go above 9, I'm going to write the units in and then carry the 10. Now my next diagonal line, I've got 6 and 4, and I've got a 2, so that's 12, and then I've also got this 1 I carried. So 6 add 4 is 10, plus 2 is 12, plus 1 is 13. So I'm going to write the 3 here, and I'm going to carry that 10. And then my next diagonal line, I have 4, 1 and 1, which is 6, plus the extra 10 I carried, so I've got 7. And then on my very last one, I have just 2. And remember to read round this way for your answer. And I can see that my answer is 27.365. So I know that 3.25 times 8.42 is 27.365. Now it's your turn to have a try. So pause the video, have a try at multiplying these decimals. So you'll need a piece of paper where you can draw your grids, and then we'll check back and see how you did. How did you get on? Let's go through the answers. So question number 1, 3.87 times 2.6. The answer is 10.062. Question number 2, 84.6 times 3.9 is 329.94. Question number 3, 0.7 times 4.7 is 3.29. Question number 4, 36.9 times 96.3 is 3,553.47. And the last question, question 5, 0.08 times 5.7 is 0.456. How did you find those? If you made any mistakes, it's a good idea to rewind the video, then you can have a look at the method again and just check that you're not making any mistakes. Well done.